What does mindfulness have to do with learning healthy boundaries and learning healthy boundaries so that you can overcome people pleasing? What is the common thread that mindfulness brings? To learn about overcoming people pleasing means you need to set healthy boundaries. And to set healthy boundaries, you need to understand what your needs are, because boundaries are based on showing up for your needs. A lot of people are like, I don't know, what are my needs? I don't understand what you mean. To understand what your needs are means you need to be able to tune into your feelings. And you need to be able to tune into the thoughts that you have about your feelings. For example, if I'm feeling anxious, am I shaming myself for feeling anxious, trying to push away the anxiety, get rid of it, wish it away, wish it wasn't there? Or am I going to tune into that anxiety with compassion, with curiosity, with love, and ask myself, what do I need? Well, I certainly don't need to drink that coffee this morning because my anxiety is already through the roof. I need to have a slow morning. I need to take some breaths. I need to step outside. I'm not going to push away my anxiety. I'm going to welcome it with compassion so that I can give it what it needs, just like I would a small child. If you've been following me for a while and watching my videos, you'll hear me talk about compassion in a way that you show up for yourself as you would your best friend, your own child. You can do that for others. Now you need to do it for yourself. Why is that so much harder? Because you don't feel like you're worthy of that. You don't feel like you deserve that. So the way to tune into your feelings is through the practice of mindful awareness, just noticing in the present moment without judgment. Because what you're doing a lot of the times is you're judging your feelings. And so the practice of mindfulness allows you to be present in the present moment with those feelings without judgment, just noticing, just being a watcher. It doesn't need judgment. What happens when somebody comes to you with their feelings and you start judging their feelings, you start telling them not to feel that way or that they're wrong for feeling that way, or you try to fix their feelings to make their feelings go away. Does that really work? The other person might just appease you. So like, oh, okay, well, this person doesn't really genuinely want to hear about my feelings. So, okay, I'll just give them some lip service so that they can go away. And so you might be doing that to yourself as you're saying, hey, blah, blah, blah. You're like, fine, I'll do all that so that this critical voice will just go away and leave me alone. So if you've been struggling with people pleasing, codependency, even addiction, these are all indications that you struggle with healthy boundaries. So you start to understand the reasons why you're engaging in these behaviors. And this is where we have to tune into our thoughts that we have about ourselves. And they might sound something like, I don't want anyone to be upset with me. It's too bad about this anxiety we're feeling. We can't let that ruin our day. People are going to be upset with us if we cancel, or if we can't show up, or if we leave early. I don't want anyone upset with me. Another thought you might have about yourself is, I don't really care about myself. It's what other people think about me that's much more important. What would other people think about me if I admitted that I felt this way? There's something wrong with the way I feel. I don't have the energy for this. Oh, this anxiety is stealing all my energy. Well, I bet it is, because you're ignoring it and it keeps showing up. Hello, hello, hello. Our feelings are information. It has a message for you, but you're not listening. Mindfulness allows us to slow down in the present moment without judgment and listen. And who's really saying, I don't have the energy for this? It's our wounded self. It's our ego. Our higher self says, you better make the time for this. You better get setting those healthy boundaries for yourself. Another thought you might hear yourself saying is, I wish this would just all go away. I wish this would just end. I wish I didn't have to have this anymore. It's like your child showing up to you needing some emotional support, and you're like, oh, I just wish this child would go away. I wish they would leave me alone. And then there's a thought that says, if they ever left me, it would be the end. oh my gosh, if this person ever left, if I ever lost this job, if this, if that, that would just be the end. We're catastrophizing things. We're looking at things in all or nothing. If that happened. Well, if that happened, you're living in the future. And that certainly isn't the way of having a mindful life, which is in the here and now, right now. Right now, that person is still present. Right now, that person is still in my life. Right now is not the end. So these thoughts that come up, and you're going to have your own thoughts, whether they're these thoughts that I just noted, you're going to have some other thoughts of your own. And those thoughts are going to result in a feeling. It's a cycle of thought, feelings. So as you're having these thoughts, it might make you feel sad. It might bring up some worry. It might bring up some fear, resentment, anger, frustration, guilt, shame. Some more feelings coming to visit you. And how are we receiving those feelings? Are we telling those feelings to go away too? We don't have the energy. We don't have the time. They're going to keep showing up. They're going to keep knocking on your door. Knock, knock. Who's there? It's your feelings. Your feelings who? Go away. I'm not home right now. We want to welcome them in. It's proven that we carry all of those emotions in our physical body. Okay, they're all in there. They're all trapped in there. They're all knocking, wanting to be heard, but we're not opening the door for them. We're like, no. We think we're getting rid of them, but we're not. They're hiding out in all of our cells of our body, and it's manifesting itself as physical tension, chronic pain, autoimmune disorders. That's another way that our feelings try to get our attention when we're not listening. And the practice of mindfulness allows you to get into your body, to pay attention on purpose, to listen without judgment. Your body, therefore, your body without a mindful response is stuck in a stress response. And we know these stress responses as the 4 Fs: fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. Those are also known as trauma responses that we automatically switch into as a means to survive. We're all just trying to survive, right? We're just trying to get through. So do we want to live our lives in survival mode all the time, which is stress mode, which is sick mode, which is being in the future worry mode, past depression mode? Because here and now sadness mode, we can manage that. Here and now anxious mode, I can manage that. Here and now stress and worry mode, I can manage that. Because I'm here right now in this moment. I can do that for myself. Which brings me back to mindfulness. Stress and trauma are not in our control most of the time. Life is stressful. It just depends on how we choose to deal with it. So whether we manage it in an adaptive way or we manage it in a maladaptive way that brings us more stress, more trauma, we can bring on our own stress and our own trauma. Most likely that's the person who is bringing on our own stress and our own trauma is ourselves. Our own people pleasing is stressful because it results in us ignoring our own needs for the needs of other people. It can be exhausting, takes up a lot of time. You know, you don't have time for your feelings. Well, but you have time for people pleasing. And then that leads to resentment. And then that leads to other outcomes, like staying in relationships that are unhealthy or drinking every night after work because we've had a stressful day. Well, that might provide some short-term relief, but over the long term, it causes stress to our vital organs, trauma to our brain and our nervous system. It's also a depressant. So over time, we don't feel better. We feel worse. We're bringing more stress onto ourselves. And what people pleasing and addiction have in common, like I said, are a lack of healthy boundaries. They're also maladaptive ways of coping with stress. But sometimes they work. Sometimes we get to avoid stress by people pleasing and engaging in addictive behaviors. Because over the long term, it's not helpful. So how can we learn to mitigate that stress in a healthier way? By being mindful of ourselves, paying attention to the reason were acting like this in the first place. Going back to those thoughts that I was having about myself, being a watcher of myself when I'm engaging in these behaviors. Go back to those thoughts that I talked about earlier. I don't want anyone to be upset with me. You catch yourself when you're saying that, and you find a mindful perspective, a different way of understanding what that really means when I say I don't want anyone to be upset with me. Because perhaps I'm upset at myself for not having a better way to manage conflict. Maybe I'm avoiding my own responsibility. Why do I struggle with conflict? Where does this come from? There's a stressful memory in my body that's been stored, and I've been carrying it around. How can I release this? And this is where mindfulness tools come in handy, through connecting with our physical body, feeling the emotion, working through the emotion, giving compassion to that emotion, giving ourselves permission to adopt a new belief. It's okay if people are upset with me. I do not have control over how other people feel, but I do have some control over my own feelings that I've been avoiding. But somehow I'm so concerned about how other people feel, right? That is an emotional boundary that you eventually come to set for yourself. It's okay if other people are upset with me. I'm not in control of other people's emotions. I'm only in control of my own. Sometimes I'm not even. Okay, sometimes I'm not even in control of my own emotions, but I can show my emotions compassion. I'm always in control of showing my emotions compassion. I can always do that. And I can show other people's emotions compassion too. Someone is upset with me, cool. Let them be upset. I will give their anger compassion. I can understand why they would feel that way. Sure. The other thought that you might be having is, I don't really care about myself. It's what other people think about me that's more important. So the shift in perspective here is, I matter. Remember? Remember, you matter. No, we don't. Okay, well, we got a little bit more talking to ourselves we need to do. Why don't I see my own value? Perhaps I've been conditioned into this limiting belief as a way to serve other people, but it does nothing for my own good, does nothing for my own self-worth. And how does that make me feel? Where do I feel that in my body? How can I move through that emotion and give that emotion some compassion? Saying I don't have the energy for this. By not having any boundaries, I actually end up using more energy than is necessary. If you hear yourself saying, I don't have the energy for this, this is coming from a very wounded place in you. And when you hear yourself saying that, it's a sign that you might be headed for burnout. Maybe you already are. So being aware of that feeling is information that you haven't been showing up for yourself. I don't have the energy for this. I don't have the energy for myself. I don't have the energy. Am I burnt out? Are we heading that way? What do we need to do? How are we really feeling? We're feeling exhausted. What do you need? Set a boundary for yourself. Set a boundary with how you're using your time. Time boundaries come into play here. I wish the stress would just all go away. So what have you been doing that's contributing to your stress? Because you are the one who's in power, but there's something going on that's been making you feel powerless, hopeless. How do you need to regain your power? What needs to be said? What needs to be communicated? Saying, I need this stress to go away. Well, we know we can't eliminate it, but we can acknowledge it. We can acknowledge we're experiencing stress. And then you can ask yourself, what do you need to alleviate some of your pain and suffering? And then giving that to yourself. And if you say you can't, or you don't have the resources, or you don't have the means, that is the wounded self telling you that, because that is not true. Your higher self would look for solutions. And if anything at all, that's always available to you is giving that stress some compassion and love, whatever that looks like. Like, it doesn't always require such a huge production of effort to relieve stress. Sometimes it's just acknowledging it and settling into your body and giving yourself compassion. That's it. Wow. Wow. wow, who would have thought that being compassionate with yourself is a stress reliever? It's all, but it's not all, right? It's not all. Because if that's all it took, you'd be doing it already. And why aren't you doing it already? Because you don't know what compassion sounds like, what it feels like, what it looks like. That's all a big mystery to you. And the only way you're really going to be able to understand what that sounds like is by tuning in, practicing being in the moment without judgment. What does that sound like? Taking your time, noticing, listening. And that thought that's telling you if they ever left me, it would be the end. If I ever said what I really wanted to say, that would be the end. They would leave me. It would be over. Would it be though? Would it? Is it even true? And what if they did? What if they did leave? Well, would that be a bad thing? Maybe that would be a good thing. Not all relationships are built to last. So what are you so afraid of? Are you using that as an excuse to never set a boundary with them? To avoid conflict? What if you did have boundaries? What if they did respect you for it? What if it didn't result in the conflict at all? This is the element of being curious, allowing the unknown to have some space. And so long as you have compassion on your side, no matter what happens, you're acting from a place of I matter, and so do they.